you have to be able to separate your work from you. Like my poem is not me. My book is not me. I wrote it, but it's, if we create something and then people give us the praise and then we're like, look at me,
Now I'm ready for kind of this challenge kind of discussion space around my work.
So I'm writing a book, mini essays, taking quotes from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and then kind of applying it to poetry. So I just sent the first essay to a group I've created, so it's a challenge group. So the goal is, it's not really like editing as much as it's kind of like thinking through ideas and just kind of like seeing like what resonates, what hits, what causes us to think more, and things like that, and things that kind of get the greatest response versus what maybe could help it achieve a greater impact. And this idea of just a challenge group, I think is really helpful, because I think a lot of times when we're looking for feedback, we can miss some of the conceptual in favor of the more minute aspects of like, you know, like the figurative language or the image, or like the grammar, or like what it looks like visually on the page, versus actually looking at the ideas and examining the ideas. You know, so
I think I even think about it like almost like, you know, when you do like focus groups for different things. I mean, even if you have like a local politician or something like that, or like they want to run some ads for their like politician, then you kind of bring in some people from all walks of life to kind of like take a look at what they're putting out. Right. And the cool thing that, you know, probably like that should happen in that space is, because these are people from all walks of life, like, you know, if you're the creator of it, or you're the politician, or you're somebody in the making of it, like maybe you have like this kind of specific focus, and maybe you miss something that would have been a huge, you know, indicator of like something on someone else's end. So I think like this kind of group kind of in a way kind of does the same thing, where you have, you know, just other people, like other writers, or just like kind of people in the field, and we're able to kind of take a look at, you know, the selections that you're putting in there. And I think, you know, for myself, it's like it might be not worse. Worse is wrong, but it's like my feedback hopefully is helpful. But it's like also it's like there's degrees of other people's feedback that are going to be like, okay, well I'm from, you know, this walk of life from over here, and like I'm trying to do something with my writing, I'm trying to do something with my poetry, and reading this work does something different than it maybe does from the bias or this person or this person. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a really cool way to kind of test drive some ideas. And I also think, I mean, more writers should kind of have a feedback chamber that is more diverse and kind of a little bit more open to discussion.
Yeah, because not everyone in the group, it's two poets and then one member who just reads all the time, you know, writes a little bit, but isn't as much of in the poet field, but still, again, kind of in the literary space to a degree. Yeah. I think is really helpful. And I don't even think it has to necessarily be, I mean, I think it would be great for all forms of art, you know, to kind of have, you know, if you're a painter, if you're a musician, you know, having a group that meets to, again, I wouldn't even just view it as like a feedback as much as like a discussion group to kind of see, you know, again, conceptually, what are you doing? But it can be for other walks of life too, like if you're starting a business, a group to kind of talk about that. It could be parenting. It could be really any sort of group you want, but just having that group of people where it's like, hey, we're gonna like critically look at this, and it's not all gonna be positive.
Yeah.
In the sense of like praise, you know, and that can certainly be a part of it, but everything's open to questioning, I think.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and I think it's funny that you bring that up when it talks about like praise in those spaces, because I also think that because we're in community, and you know, what is that, Lauryn Hill, like I'm sensitive about my ish. So it's like, you know, a lot of people don't really kind of open themselves up for that kind of discussion, right? Because they're like, well, if I open myself up for that kind of discussion, then what if the reception is not
Yeah, well, it's not positive.
What if it's not great? And a lot of times, like, that's also why you see people kind of put themselves solely in situations where it's like you're gonna get praise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing that's harmful to that, is that if you want to put yourself like maybe like in the actual market later on, maybe you're selling a book, maybe you're selling like a class, maybe you're doing performances and things like that, because now you're putting yourself in a position where it's like the stranger has to maybe rate whether or not they're going to like support you, or not even necessarily support themselves by purchasing something that you're offering. So once you start closing yourself off to that kind of discussion around your work or what your product is, you start closing yourself off from the potential to kind of reach the everyday other person.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we had a micro mic reading here last night. We had Steve Abbott and Celia Ayers, who both. It was really good. Yeah. And I'm excited to post the discussion. The discussion we had is we talk a lot about mentorship, since both of them have experience of taking on mentors. Celia right now has a cohort working towards a manuscript, and I've also been able to work with some of the poets in that who are getting some work done too. And like everyone's had such great things to say, but one of the things that's come up a lot is that a lot of times when people are asking for feedback, they're not really asking for feedback, they're really asking for validation. Like, is what I'm doing worth it? Can other people get value from what I'm offering? And so I think if you're someone that likes this idea of a challenge group, I think you also need to be at a position where you're comfortable with, like, you have to have confidence in your own level of work already. Like you're already, there's already the assumption that what you're doing can stand on its own, and you're just furthering that. But if you have doubts that it can even work on its own, then I don't know if necessarily a challenge group is going to work out, because a challenge group has to last, and if your thing can't stand on its own, then it's not going to last.
So can you describe kind of what that feeling is, or what elements kind of put themselves together so that like, okay, well, now I'm ready for kind of this challenge kind of discussion space around my work?
Yeah. So I think I think firstly what I would say is that I wouldn't necessarily do it if I'm completely new in a field and like I've never done anything in the field, like in this case, like I've never written, like, not that this collection is poems, but like I've never really written before. I don't know if I would make a challenge group around writing. I might instead seek more like mentorship first, right? Okay. And develop it in the field first. But I think another component too is having confidence in yourself. And I think one way you can kind of detect if you have confidence or not is if you're overly defensive. Like if someone offers you an honest critique that is valuable, and I really can't stress those qualifiers enough, because not every critique you receive is going to be valuable. But if someone is offering you valuable critique and your first inclination is to defend yourself, I don't know if you're ready for a challenge group.
Yeah, and I think
I'm not trying to light bell at you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's like something that's an interesting kind of note, because I think that also happens really just generally when we're talking about workshops or anything like that. A lot of people go into workshops thinking that the workshop is, even if they're expecting some kind of feedback, or like negative or positive, but in this case kind of negative, then they're thinking that their positioning on that should be defending what I've written until I can't defend it anymore. Right. You know what I mean? And so, to be clear, I absolutely have been that exact poet at times, where I go into a space, I'm like, I want to share my work, but because at the time that I was writing, it happens a lot of times, like you're writing it and you're like, oh my gosh, this blew my mind, like when I was writing it. And because that's how it functioned for you, you're thinking like, no, everybody's going to be blown away. So blown away that they're not going to have any kind of critiques or anything. And so you bring it into that space. I'll never forget. So we were at, we did this workshop, and it was at Righting Wrongs, actually. And it was like, it wasn't after, I think it was like a thing that they did like before the show. But I had written, like, we had this like workshop where we wrote first, and then everybody shared. And this is like when I'm like really young, like a much younger poet. Well, it was much younger in my poetry journey, right? So, where I'm at in my poetry journey. And so I wrote this poem, and I'm thinking to myself, like, holy crap, I just like broke the code. And so I can't remember who it was that we were talking, like I was talking about, like an aspect of my poems that it actually might have been Will. And I don't know if he was actually doing the workshop as much as I think he was, like, he had came in because he was like hosting the show, but he had said something about my poem that I was like, no, no way, you just don't understand. And then like I'm like, I think in that space I was very defensive over my work, and part of it is because I wasn't as familiar with who Will Evans is, right? Because now it's like, if like whether it be my work or the fact that it's Will Evans, I can concede on both and be like, okay, like that's Will Evans. But then I'm just thinking, like, the only thing I'm thinking about is, man, they're trying to get me to change me. Like, this is my work. You're trying to get me to change me. And then thinking back, and I was like really defensive about it. And so I took it, like, after naturally the open mic was afterwards, and then I took it home. And back then, this was a time when I would literally go to like 4 different open mics like a week. So back then, like I would go to Righting Wrongs. Whenever Steve's like show that was on that Monday, I would go to Steve Abbott's show too.
Oh, the Forum.
The Forum. And then I would go to Righting Wrongs, and then I would go to Writer's Block. Then I would go to the Nest, and then sometimes there's like different shows that might happen on Fridays, and I would go to those too. So I took it home, and mind you, I had like a 9 to 5. So like literally, I took it home, was looking at this poem forever, and I can't even remember, like, because I don't think I use the poem anymore. But I was looking at this poem forever, like, nah, what is wrong? Like, of course he's wrong. I slept on it and I woke up the next morning, and I'm like, I'm going to work, and I'm at work. Very bad employed, by the way. I have the poem like on my desk. I'm sitting myself like,
lead sales, but horrible.
Right. But I'm looking at him like, this is like, no, like this is how this poem should function. And then the second that I was just like, let me just try it the way that he said. The second I did that, I was just like, I'm an idiot. But it was like, it all kind of made sense. And so, which is all just to say that, and like, I think by Wednesday, the show, like by that night, the show, Writer's Block, I tried that poem, and I was just like, oh, it even felt better in performing it. And so like, there's like a lot of like those type of things that you just have to be, I think, open to, like, as opposed to fighting for the poem, or I guess you take out what fighting for the poem actually means. Because a lot of times it means, for poets, it means fighting for this exact version of the poem, the one that came out of your brain and onto the piece of paper that day. And I'm like, fighting for the poem should mean like, okay, like if there is a new idea, does this new idea make the poem stronger? Like, try it, give it like some energy before you kind of summarily dismiss it, which is, again, another way of, if you're confident in your work, if you're confident in who you are as an artist or as a person or as a writer or anything like that, then it allows you that space to be like, well, if there is other ideas, it doesn't break my ego, it doesn't hurt like, who I am as a person to try new things or to try to incorporate new things. And so like, a group like this where it's like, if there's positive or negative feedback, neither of those means that like, oh, this is like, a terrible direction to go down. Yeah. Which is not going to be the case if you've never written a poem before and you're like, hey, I just want to give, this is this group for all the people that want to judge my brand new poetry.
So I think it's great you mentioned, but I think also having in your group people whose opinions, you can trust them to be objective is really helpful. Will was actually in when I was at Cal. He was in my cohort. And that was,
Will.
yeah, no, he's a super smart guy too. My God.
He's the reason why I went bald and grew a beard.
Will Evans does not have hair. The earring is next, I guess. Huh? Is that...
I should say I think I was like, I'm not Jordan
yet. I want to actually touch on that sense of objectivity really quick too. So I think because that's another key component, and I think it's somewhat related to confidence, but I think also just the degree with just artists as well as you have to be able to separate your work from you. Like my poem is not me, my book is not me. I wrote it, but it's like when people are making comments on what I produced, they're making comments on what I produced. They're not making comments on me. And if you're not able to create that separation, you're probably not ready for a challenge group. Because every time that they're going to raise something, you're going to think that they're attacking you. And it has nothing to do with you at all. You know, we're really attached to the things that we create. And almost to an unhealthy level. So it's... If you struggle with that sort of separation, I wouldn't recommend a challenge group. You know?
Yeah. So do you feel like there is, like, what is the kind of healthy level? Because, you know, I think I would say, like, as an artist, you should be in a way attached to the things you create. You know what I mean? Like there should be, I would even say even like a degree of pride like around it. Like, you know, like there are people that are creating nothing, right? There are people that they're like, I would love, you know, we see it all the time at like open mics and stuff like that, where it's like there's somebody that's like, they'll come to the open mic, but like, I love poetry. I would love to write poems. I think I'm a poet at heart. Never wrote a poem, or I don't think I'll ever finish this poem that I've been writing for a year and a half or something of that nature. And you know, everybody on their own time and in their own time, but you should. I think there should be like a degree or a level of pride for people that are creating things, and definitely like, and if you're like putting it out in the world, like that too. So what do you feel like is like kind of the healthy level of like pride, kind of the different that shooting that gap between like that pride and detachment for an artist?
So we're not saying I don't have pride in what I create. It's a whole different argument. I can be very proud of the things that I make. I'm not going to let comments about what I've created determine my own self-worth. The 1-star review on Amazon is not talking about me as an author. Conversely, the
no matter what that comment said.
But it's also true because it works both ways. It's about the critique and it's also about the praise.
Yeah.
The 5-star review is not making a comment about me. It's making a comment about the work. You know, the review in the newspaper is not talking about me. It's talking about the work. I can still be proud of the work. I can still be connected to the work because it's like I was the one that made it, you know?
Yeah.
But I think what I also have to understand is if I'm presenting work to the world, I also lose some ownership of it. People are going to do what they will with it that I have no control over.
Yeah.
You know, from a standpoint that a lot of artists are worried about, like AI, for instance. Talking with one of our poets recently from a recording who really didn't want to have themselves recorded because they're like, hey, if I have myself recorded, this is going to be used to train AI and like to do things potentially that I have no control over.
Yeah.
You know, and that's our self, our person, you know, our visual representation in the real world, you know, so we don't even necessarily have complete control over that. So that's the thing where it's like if I create something and then someone makes a comment of it and I ruminate on that comment for days, that's a sign that I think we have an unhealthy relationship with what we've created. Yeah, and conversely, if we create something and then people give us the praise and then we're like, look at me, I'm I'm on top of the world. Well, that's I would want that for us, for how we view ourselves anyways. I wouldn't want it to be reliant on external validation.
Yeah. I think there's an anticipation when you create anything for there to be this warm, ecstatic welcome from the world that's around you. I even think as poets are kind of conditioned that way, in a good way, I would say, because I think like stuff like open mics, like that's good, right? It's good that, and I also don't think that open mics, like the only function of an open mic would be, naturally, if you're like, oh, I want to start putting books and stuff like that. Like a lot of that is just for like self-expression and to getting things out. And there's people, we used to do 7th Draft Poetry open mic over at $2 Radio headquarters over there on Parsons, and it was so funny because like about 50% of the poets that would come are people that they're working on projects, or they're working on like just building up their own catalog of poetry and kind of building towards whatever other piece of work that they're building towards. But the other half were people that they had never thought about getting on an open mic before, but because they're kind of in the area, or and they've seen the sign, or they've heard one of us do poems and they want to come check it out, they're like, yeah, I don't know, I kind of wrote this poem kind of randomly and I wanted to get on the open mic and express myself. And I think that, again, for those people, when they're expressing, the thing that they get back from the room is claps or snaps and stuff like that, and that's good. And I think there's like a lot of times there's this conditioning of, and you can actually kind of see it sometimes, like in how people like think about themselves, like either online or something like that, where they're like, man, I gotta rewind so I know this poem is great, and like they're riding that wave. And I want to be clear, I at points was exactly that person, right? And so like I'm not excluding myself from this. I'm just saying that, like, even there's points where I'm like, yeah, this poem is great because this happened while I'm performing this poem, or this happened when I wrote the poem and somebody read it or something like that. But yeah, like there should be kind of like, I hear what you're saying, like that detachment from like, whether it's actually, I think it's so much easier to obsess over the negativity, and I mean like truly obsess over it, right? Like exactly what you said, like going back to that comment, like if you put up a YouTube video of a poem and then like somebody makes a comment and then you're like, let me click on on who this person is. Let me go to their Facebook. Let me see what like. That can like send you into a spiral. So yeah, there has to be a little bit of an attachment to be like, okay, this is what this person. Even if they get personal, it's only personal to them, right? Like, okay, maybe it's personal for them, but if it's personal for you, then yeah, like it's anything that you put out into the world is going to get mixed reception.
Yeah. Which is why when you're choosing people, if you're interested in a challenge group, you gotta pick people that have your best interest in mind. Because like internet strangers, you know nothing about them, and this is the danger of the I mean, everyone will talk about this, even people that are very much aware of it. It's like, you'll have 1,000 comments and one negative comment, 1,000 happy positive comments and one negative comment, and we're just evolutionary, just trained to home in on that and focus on it. And these are people that we have no connection with. It's almost 100% of cases a parasocial relationship where we have no idea who is on the other side of the screen. Yeah. And so why would we care about them? So picking people that have your best interest in mind, because it also changes the impact.
100%.
Anyways, if you guys have other questions about challenge groups, this is the first time I've ever done this, so I'll keep you guys posted on how it goes and things. But you can let us know, or if you've done a challenge group yourself, be sure to keep me posted.